All right, we can begin. Let me make sure that I've got the comments set up. Not the comments, the other. There's this other thing I have to make sure it's correct before we truly get into the festivities. The old one. Well, that's something they actually used against Sanders. They said, "Oh, he's old and white, just like the other two, so there's no difference. We need a new generation of leadership." Playing the identity politics crap. All right, let's go ahead to start this off. So I don't think in the entire franchise there's a more useless character that's on the side of the protagonist than Goten. Uh, he has been in at least three different series now: Z, GT, and Super, and not a single instance have they used him in what I would believe an effective way. So the difference between him and Kid Trunks is that Kid Trunks kind of had to be a character or a thing because he was introduced in Cell Arc as a baby. So they had to use him. They just decided to, instead of making him be a strong fighter on his own, they decided to have him be butt buddies with another little kid. It was really dumb. Um, I say the only thing that really worked for them was when we get to see their interactions with their dads, because we did get to see Kid Trunks train with Vegeta, and that was nice. And then we got to see Goku and Goten meet. That's probably one of my top three favorite moments in the Buu arc, because I'd actually mentioned that one of the things I didn't like about the ending for Cell is that if it were the true ending that people like to say it should be, then you would have Goku dead, and his, just basically leaving all his friends and family behind again, which ironically enough ends up happening at the end of the manga anyway, but it still is even worse because at least in that scenario, he wasn't taken from them in the sense that he didn't die. He just decided to go live in a village. Yeah, they do serve, are probably are written at their best when you see them interact with their parents. But unfortunately, a big part of the Buu arc is Vegeta out of commission. So with Trunks, the only time you really see him interact with any mentor type character is with Piccolo when they're Gotenks. I'm gonna do a whole separate stream on the fusions and how they screwed those up. No, they're just these two doppelganger characters that like the writers of each show, other than GT, seem afraid to ever separate. Like you would think they were Siamese twins. I remember they tried to show Goten getting mad because Chi-Chi got turned into an egg and smashed by Super Buu. And right after that, they literally do nothing with his rage. Like you don't see him mention it again or talk about how it's been making him upset. I think that was a real disservice to the character because that was at that point apparently the only relative he had left and one that he had grown up with his entire life. And to have them get murdered and to just be like, "Oh, this is so horrible. I'll get that villain," and then for the rest of the arc not even bring it up. It was pretty funny. Like I said, the Buu arc has a lot of good ideas that I don't think they're either not given enough time or they're not used as effectively as I would prefer. I will say at the very least, I think out of any of the people that are from the Buu arc that are introduced in that arc, they're probably the only two that actually get to have a somewhat big role, because I had mentioned how after the Great Saiyaman arc, they pretty much get rid of Videl. They just throw her to the wayside after she gets smashed by Spopovich. But then after they get probably to around the point of uh, Fat Boo killing Babidi is when they start to kind of go in the direction of, not like they had been setting it up to be Gotenks versus Fat Boo, and instead we get Super Boo versus Gotenks, and then we get Gotenks being used as basically a tool for Super Boo to fight Gohan. I don't know. It's like the arc started off with a sense of direction. It just kind of falls off, and those two characters get kind of because one of the things Toriyama was doing with that arc that kind of annoys me is if you couldn't fight the main villain or help in some way against the main villain, you basically just got murdered unnecessarily. That's why Boo was able to kill everybody on the lookout, and that's why right after pretty much being surpassed by Gohan, instead of having the two of them as Gotenks help Gohan fight Super Boo, Toriyama was like, "Oh no, I'm going to make this have more suspense by having them get absorbed," and then they're pretty much useless for the rest of the show. And they never get to do anything of any distinction in the series. Like in Z, they just operate as the one that hangs out with the other one. I will say the movies do a better job of using them distinctively because you had Trunks have a special relationship with Tapion. And was that the 13th movie, Wrath the Dragon? And you had Goten have the family, was it the family Kamehameha with Gohan and Goku when they fought Broly and Broly's Second Coming? So I'll give the films credit, but that's another thing that I can't even credit Toriyama with coming up with those ideas because that's Toei trying to make them have some distinction. Really, the only thing Trunks does that's distinct in all of Z is probably when he wins that tournament, and it wasn't even really that cool of a match because it was just Goten being stupid and hitting it out of bounds. No, they use they he probably is the I would say the better used of the two. And we'll get into that later how they try to and it kind of sucks because the only reason they use him any more than they use Goten is because a lot of times they think they can get the popularity from Future Trunks off of a different character, which is why I've seen people who call uh, Kid Trunks bootleg Future Trunks or a poor man's Future Trunks. And it sucks because one of the things that was absent for Future Trunks, like as a like what made his character was that he grew up pretty much without any of the Z fighters. So it would have been really nice to see Kid Trunks, who grew up with all of them, actually interact and have relationships that are exclusive with each one of them. But we don't really get that much material of his relationship with Vegeta, even with the other series, because it's usually him hanging out with some other character or the two of them not being around each other for any sustained period. Like I actually think Future Trunks was with Vegeta more in the Cell arc than Kid Trunks was with Vegeta in the Buu arc, which is really disturbing. That means for the majority of their screen time, they're not even around each other. They get that one scene, that one training scene at the start of the arc, and then they get the scene where uh, right before Vegeta's sacrifice, where Trunks gets held by him, and that's about it. They just that's why I said Toriyama is like the most frustrating writer in the world because he'll come up with some really good idea and just won't use it. It's pretty disturbing actually. Not like oh it's creepy, but it's sad that he has these ideas or this stuff that he can set up, and then there's like no delivery at all. Because you had a Trunks who grew up with his dad, and you had a son of Goku who didn't grow up with Goku in any capacity. Which I guess, and that's kind of the screwed up part that's kind of what happened to Gohan anyway, because for a good chunk of his upbringing, Goku was dead, so he kind of still fits that role slightly. But that's why it's difficult to really give Goten anything to do that's not involving Trunks because they don't. He doesn't have any proper setup, like nothing distinct about him. Hell, they don't even let him get Super Saiyan 2, and that form is way past its expiration date in terms of usage. No, it's really sad that they come up with these characters and they don't do anything with them. I guess we can get into GT probably at this point. So people like to say, "Oh, Toriyama had nothing to do with GT. GT was just this thing that was made by Toei." And in actuality, Toriyama made the designs of the characters. You know, so that's just something that people like to pretend didn't happen because they want to. There was this thing basically where the original creator is like God, and it would be sacrilege to suggest that they were involved with an inferior product of their material, which is what a lot of fans consider GT to be. But in that series, even though one of the things I have criticisms of it is that they don't use the characters that often, like outside of a couple, they do use Trunks pretty effectively during the first two arcs. He's involved with all the little misadventures with Pan and Goku in that first saga, and he isn't like I don't really dislike his character at all. I don't find him as compelling as Future Trunks, but he still is okay. He's all right. Uh, and it's really a shame that he gets used in a way that's distinct for the first time in the entire franchise, continuously in that series, and then after the first saga, he just rapidly goes out of focus. Like he goes from being one of the three main characters of that show to literally doing nothing after getting possessed by baby. Like you would, it is so crazy to see how he just gets regulated to not doing anything for the rest of the series after they get back to Earth. Almost like the writers basically forgot about him because GT was originally supposed to end with the baby arc. So maybe whoever came back and decided to write the show after that was like, yeah, I'm not going to use Trunks anymore. He's just a bootleg version of Future Trunks. And even then, like his main moment of distinction for me will be being the first person possessed by Baby because I still think Baby's probably in my top five villains of Dragon Ball. He's just he's contributes to the lore. He actually poses a threat. He was just a really like GT doesn't really have any villains I like necessarily other than him. He's great. But again, I could say the same thing about Super. They don't really make antagonists I think are that good except for maybe Black. And that's about it. No, they use him effectively and then he gets chopped off. And then for the rest of the show, he's just there to fill background shots. Like they have him fight Super 17 with Vegeta and Oob and Gohan and Goten. Then they have him show up to fight Shenron. And that's pretty much it. His role just decreases like crazy. And it's the reason it's so important is because there's no other character in the series uh, who has that transition. They either get completely ignored the whole way through, or they're Goku or Pan. So he gets misused. Like he actually even gets less screen time in the finale than Krillin, Piccolo, or Vegeta, and they they didn't have anywhere near the large role that he did in GT, at least at the start. Like if you take all of the arcs of the series and combine them, they would have less screen time than he did in that first arc. So it's like the writers basically were ashamed of their own show. They had to rely on your nostalgia for Z. Yeah, they should have had Trunks fight one of the dragons, Shadow Dragons. They should have had him fight Super 17 by himself. And the only thing he does in that whole arc is serve as the catalyst for it, where when he gets attacked by set by the by Hellfighter 17, and then when he's getting tossed around like a rag doll by Super 17 after that. So that's he's really just there to get smashed, which is very unfortunate and a continued disservice to the character. And also another disservice to the character is his design. I'll, I will I will go on record and say that Trunks's GT design is probably, I think, the worst design of any main character of a Dragon Ball show. Like it just looks awful to me. He's got this stupid bandana with some shorts, these enormously long socks. Just like what the hell? And it's screwed up because most of the GT designs I don't really have a problem with. Like they made Krillin an old man, but they didn't really mess up. Like Piccolo looks the same. Vegeta's got a new hairstyle. But I like the clothing. It's only Trunks' design. I'm just like, what the hell was he thinking? Like this is a serious warrior, and he's walking around looking like a frat boy. Hell, one of the things the GT did that I really liked was give Goten a distinct design, where it's kind of like Goku's hairstyle, except it doesn't really have anything on the back. So it's like it just was original. I like that about that design. And I got to say, even though he doesn't have anywhere near the screen time that Trunks gets throughout the whole show, they do try to use his character in a new direction. Like they gave him a girlfriend, they gave him that one fight against Baby, and then also the fight with Baby Goten versus Gohan, which I thought was cool. So he's a character that they at least tried to do some stuff with, at least from a personality standpoint. They didn't use him effectively either, but they did introduce some stuff that I thought was pretty cool. If it only it usually is kind of like a backhanded insult when I say I just wish they would have used it more, because that stuff actually seemed kind of interesting. We don't really have, like, out of the male Saiyans, none of them seem interested in going on dates. They're all kind of, they either get with one chick or they want to go study or train, or that was something that made him distinct, especially from Trunks, who we didn't even see express any interest in any chicks during that whole series. Granted, he wasn't around that many, but still, it was just nice to see them acting independent. That's one of the things I'll give GT credit for. It did try to break up the two of them as being butt buddies. Like one of them has to always be around the other one. It's like we have to make sure that Trunks and Goten only are able to function as a joint unit instead of two different people that have different families and likes and dislikes. Yeah, people like to think that there are fans who give GT a lot of flack for no reason, and I agree with that. There are those type of fans, but I can look at the show and, let's say, not really like it and still say I like this, I like that. Because I don't believe there's any piece of work out there, like fictional material, that is just entirely bad. Like there's nothing redeemable about it. Yeah, my biggest problem for their characters in that show is they're underused, but my biggest highlight is that it's probably the only time we've seen them get used independently from each other. Also, another annoying thing, and this is just relating to the games, so this isn't GT's fault at all. I hate how in the games, I like a couple of them have it to where whenever they want to have Trunks be like do a retelling of GT, they use Trunks, future Trunks as a stand-in for Trunks. So like in Budokai Tenkaichi 2, you had future Trunks be used as Trunks. Like they use his character in the game to represent adult Trunks, the Trunks from the regular timeline. When they could have just made, and like they are different characters. I don't know why people can't get over that. Oh God, they don't. People just confuse me. Like we can't just give him a new make him a separate character in the game. Let's have him be future Trunks with a different name. So let's go on to Super. Um, when Super started, I don't know if you remember the first episode was Goten and Trunks getting water for Videl for whatever stupid reason. But I really thought from that first episode that maybe they might actually do something in the show with the two of those characters. And after watching it, I can positively say that pretty much nothing happens for them. Like the only thing of really any distinction is when Kid Trunks gets used to basically interact with Future Trunks. They do use him during the Future Trunks arc. Again, not as well as I would like, but they do give him that distinction. But Goten doesn't get any damn thing. I think the only time we saw him actually get an episode worth of screen time was when they did the 2 episode hit saga. And we can get into hit later on another day. How misused his character was. I still can't go over that prick that was like, Hit's a main character of Super. He replaced Piccolo. I'm like, dude, Piccolo is in way more of that show. And Hit is literally absent for an entire arc. How the hell is that a main character? So I said, people just they just say stuff, and the guy actually later admitted that he was just saying stuff. So that's another reason I'm annoyed by these people. No, they really dropped the ball in this show again on using the two of them, and it kind of sucks because as much as I liked that the Tournament of Power included some of the humans, in retrospect, they could have used Goten and Trunks instead of Krillin and Tien, and I'm saying that only because I think both of those characters weren't allowed to actually do anything in that arc that was worth a damn. Like when the tournament started, the Tien takes out like what one guy, and then Krillin takes out one person, gets yanked. So when I say I think they should have been replaced with Goten and Trunks, I'm not saying that to say, oh, I want the Saiyan show, I want every Saiyan to always be used, but just going off of what we know about the actual how the arc turned out, that made me kind of just say, yeah, they probably could have used them instead. No, I was really disappointed that they didn't give them anything to do, and it didn't have to be that way because they could have used like with Kid Trunks during the Future Trunks arc. It would have been so cool to see him, Future Trunks, and Vegeta all fire off the Gala gun, like kind of like a Vegeta version of the father son Kamehameha from Broly's Second Coming. And they just don't do it. They don't care. They could have used Trunks to have some banter with Goku Black and with Zamasu. And it's like you have an arc that's about team ups, like characters, fighting together, which is like the main thing that the Future Trunks arc had in terms of the combat after Future Zamasu was introduced. But then the biggest tag team that we have in all of the series, Goten and Trunks, you just decide not to use them that arc. I'm still laughing because I'm remembering when people were saying that Goku Black was future Goten. And I was like, what the hell? That doesn't make any sense. He wasn't even born in that timeline because Goku died before he could be conceived. But it's funny because I think if that was the case, they probably would have used him, the regular Goten, more effectively than they did in all of Super. It's kind of like how with the Hellfighter 17 stuff, it gives 17 the only instance of him coming back in Dragon Ball prior to Super, and lets 18 do a little bit of stuff. It's like I don't really like the way it turned out, but I'm glad the characters that got used a little bit. So it's just them kind of introducing an idea and not doing anything with it. Uh, Goku Black is future Goten. How? So I don't know how they work. Um, what else is there? Oh, for a Tournament of Power, it would have been really cool to see Goten and Trunks as Gotenks fight. What's her name? What's that broad from Universe 2 everybody hates, the one with the green hair? Uh, fight Ribrianne because the thing is, both of them are kind of like superhero esque in the sense that they, um, what's a good example of it? They're flamboyant. Like they jump up, they do these poses and dances. But that would have been a pretty unique battle. But again, we didn't get it because they wanted to make sure the two of them did nothing in Super. I actually had this joke with a guy that Super basically took everything that was introduced in the Buu arc, whether that's a character like Videl or Goten and Trunks. I know Trunks debuted in the Cell arc, but he got his big role in the Buu arc or Boo, and they just throw him to the wayside along with Hercule. And then like anything that was introduced that arc in terms of strategy, like Fusion or Super Saiyan 3, they just get rid of as well. Like everything from the Buu arc has no legacy in Super. Speaking of good battles we never got, in the and I always forget this because it was so small, in the Super 17 arc, they have this big thing about the villains coming back from hell. And on paper, that sounds like the coolest thing in the world. Like, oh my God, all these old villains are going to come back. We're going to get to see matchups between them and different Z fighters. And it is so criminally underused. Like, they don't even try to do anything cool with them. We could have had Goten and Trunks versus the Ginyu Force because they're, again, it's a flamboyant thing. We could have had Goten and Trunks versus Raditz and Nappa. And like I'm only saying that because we did get to see Nappa try to attack Vegeta, and it was really stupid and lame and boring. In terms of like, we didn't even get to see Nappa say anything. Um, we could have Goten and Trunks versus Deborah and Babidi. Like there were so many good fights they could have had, and they just don't do anything with them. That's why I said, as a fan of this series, it really disturbs me when I can come up with stuff that's more creative than the writers. Like you bring back all these old villains, and you don't do a goddamn thing with them. It's not like they were on some time limit because we know they had multiple episodes of just nothing going on of that Goku and 17 fight, which is probably the worst major battle out of any of the main antagonists of GT. Like it's literally, I'm just gonna keep shooting 17. It'll just gather my energy. Oh, it didn't work. Damn it. Yeah, I'm really disappointed by this series. They could have had so many good fights. Not even just Goten and Trunks. We could have had Piccolo versus Deborah, the Demon King versus the reincarnation of the demon that took over Earth. We could have had, who's another example? I don't know. I can't think of it. 19 versus 18 because they didn't actually get to meet in the Android arc, or at least we didn't see them meet if they did. Yeah, the Super 17 arc is where they get, like, every arc of GT has a good idea and they just don't use it as much as I'd like them to. Like with the Shadow Dragons, they had what was it? It was Nova Shenron and Ice Shenron. I think it would have been cooler if we saw Goten and Trunks fight the two of them because it's the tag team versus the tag team. Yeah, a Nova Shenron's probably the only character GT introduced that gets like a real character arc. They still don't give him that much screen time, but it was still nice to see him get used beyond just being like a one-off fight. So it was nice to kind of get that moment. But it's again part of that thing of how they put up some idea and then they don't use them uh, effectively. Like you're gonna have all these dragons, and instead of having each member of the main cast fight a different one, we're gonna just all sit on our hands while Goku has to save the day and travel around the world with his granddaughter who can't fight anybody, who's just there to add unnecessary tension to the fights. That's her only reason to even be there. I gotta say, looking back, Super at least tried to give each of the characters from Z some kind of little thing to do with, especially with the Tournament of Power, because a lot of the characters that get used there literally did nothing in all of Super up until that point. Like 17 didn't do anything, 18 didn't do anything. Gohan didn't do. Well, I guess he did get like a couple of episodes, and so did Krillin. But that's like the running theme. The less screen time you got in Super before the tournament, you got a higher chance of actually doing something cool. Yeah, they sit around just kind of act weird. It's like, hey, character we haven't used this whole series. We're going to give you a big arc in the end of it. Even though there was no build up, there was no foreshadowing. Like 17 came back out of nowhere. And then all Goten and Trunks do for that whole arc is sit on his island and basically just we don't even get any material of them on the island. They're just there. We're just told they're there and they're having fun. Like I guess that's cool, but we they could have at least shown it to us. Because during the Frieza arc, they actually did that where it would be some scene of Goku fighting Frieza, and then we'd get a little flash of what's going on at Kame House with Roshi and the rest of the human cast that's still on planet Earth. So we could have had an episode about that, but they didn't care to expand on it, so we just kind of go, okay, well, whatever. It's pretty unfortunate too because I don't know, the series has just like a running theme of bringing characters in and just not doing anything with them. Like I'd say probably the best arc is for Goten and Trunks is still the Boo arc. Definitely for Goten, you could make the case that it's probably not as good for because Trunks actually does get at least a little bit to do in some of the in one of the arcs of both GT and Super, which I brought up earlier. So you could make the case that they actually do use him, but a lot of that is because he's a version of Trunks that's readily available. So if you didn't have future Trunks being this really popular character, I don't think they would give Kid Trunks anything to do. Kid Trunks got so wasted they could have they didn't have him interact enough with future Trunks in my opinion. They didn't have him fight any of the either of the antagonists of that arc. They just they dropped the ball because that would have been so cool to see both Trunks team up and fight the both versions of Zamasu, which is what Goku Black was. So I don't know why they don't use them as much as they could. Well, I do know why because they want to keep promoting Goku and Vegeta. Even then, it still would have been nice to see the other version of Trunks, kind of sympathize with his future self. It's like, wow, he really can't catch a break. I'm so grateful to have lived in the timeline that he saved, and I want to pay him back. He could have had a really nice story. And they just decided instead we're going to rehash the same two people that got all the attention in Super. With Goten, it's a little bit more difficult because there was actually one person who predicted that when the trailer for the Hit episode aired, where Hit was the assassin of Goku, that we were going to get a whole arc of Goku being dead and Gohan and Goten just looking around and doing the detective work and whatnot. And instead, it was over as soon as it started. But it would have been nice to see one of them fight, like whether it was Gohan or Goten fight Hit. Again, Hit's the only character from Super I'm definitely going to do a separate upload on because or stream on because he's such a like he gets introduced so cool, and then they just don't let him do anything for the rest of the show that actually matters in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, they're not really used effectively at all. Um, and I guess what I get so disturbed by are these people are like they're the next generation, they're the next generation, but you didn't set them up. Like they just get introduced in the Buu arc. They do all this training that doesn't amount to anything because they're completely left out of the Kid Buu fight. And ever since then, it feels like the writers, if they want to have the son of Goku do something, they'll use Gohan. If they want to have the son of Vegeta do something, they use Future Trunks. So these two get shoved to the back burner, and I think that's especially unfair for Trunks, um, because he actually is Vegeta's firstborn kid that is around, and they just kind of keep on. Like even in the Moro arc, they've been reduced to like Goten's not mentioned at all. Trunks is mentioned as, oh, I'm sure he could beat. There's some antagonist that Vegeta was talking about, but my point is they're not even in that arc, and it's been going on for over a year. It's actually in its climax. And it's just really disappointing to keep seeing these characters basically get nothing to do. Like they've pretty much been turned into uh, what's a good example of it? Like an afterthought. Like they don't even are like, oh yeah, those two, yeah. They didn't let them fight in Resurrection F. They didn't let them fight in the Tournament of Power. They didn't let them fight in the Future Trunks arc. They don't even let them fight now. The only time they've been used in Super to fight is when they turn the Gotenks to attack Beerus. And that was just used for slapstick humor. And I guess what's so aggravating is the only time they get to really be a threat or a character that people want to see get used again is when they fuse. And it's really disturbing because no one would ever say, oh, forget Goku and Vegeta. We need to see Gogeta every 8 seconds. It's only with these two characters that the idea of fusing is so heavily embedded in what people want to see from them that they kind of say, screw them if they're not going to fuse. Like I couldn't tell you one thing Goten as a character has done for all of just the entire series of Z or Super, because he's just the fusion boy. He just fuses with Future Trunks, not Future Trunks, with Kid Trunks. Oh, by the way, that's another thing they missed out on in the Future Trunks arc. I don't know why they didn't have him interact with Goten and go, "Oh, you're that kid that wasn't born because your dad died too early." It would have been nice to see that he could say, "Oh, that's something else that's different about this timeline." Because they did let him see Marin, who wasn't from Future Trunks' timeline because Krillin was dead. Yeah, that's just such an aggravating setup. People don't even care. They just let the characters die over and over again. Then they don't even do it. Like they got set up to beat Boo, and then during the final fight against Boo, they don't help other than putting their arm up in the air, and they spend most of it dead. Like I said, the best ending against Kid Buu would have been to have Goku, Vegeta, Gotenks, Gohan, Piccolo, Krillin, Tien, Yamcha, the androids, and Fat Buu all destroy Kid Buu with some beam. That would have been the best because it's every one of the characters that has either been on Goku's side or was his enemy that came over to his side, just completely destroying the last dash of the same stupid technique again. I really am sick of the spirit bomb. It just gets used as this thing to build tension. Seem like other characters actually did something that matters. But again, people are going to say they're not strong enough to do that. Win. So I probably would just say that they could train, and then over the course of they did an arc about Boo again, where they brought back Kid Boo and they let Goten and Trunks actually beat Boo this time. That would have been perfect. Just like with Resurrection F, where I thought they were going to let Vegeta beat Frieza, and instead we got more Goku rehashing. I didn't really touch on this that much in the Resurrection F video, not the Resurrection F video, the one on Vegeta. But my perfect ending for Resurrection F would have been for Vegeta and Golden Form Frieza to be in a beam struggle, and then while they're in the you know riding, because they love doing that. No, it's such a sad thing to show. And then when Trunks was around, it was the Future Trunks show, and then when he left, it was the Goku, Vegeta, 17, and Frieza show. Exempt from the rule of, oh, it's always wasted. And have a good day.